This afternoon, I wanted to talk about what we've seen with the stock so far, up 22%. Good to see it's holding a lot of those gains from after hours yesterday. I also want to talk about thinking more about the results that we got, as well as the conference call that we had. I would say going into the conference call, I felt very good with the financials, not as good about the guidance, considering they basically guided flat and largely held the full year guidance very similar to where it was previously. Um, so nothing bullish with the guidance. And on the conference call, I will say, with respect to the international segment of the business, we heard Alex Karp essentially saying um, not to expect any growth, any significant growth from the geographies outside of the U.S., which I guess is a theme we've been facing for the last couple years. And so I'm a bit disappointed that he essentially lowered the expectations even further, down to 10%, I believe it was, for international growth. Again, I'm fairly disappointed in that. He also made the remark that they will be essentially cutting back on spending internationally and doubling down in the US. So I'd expect more cost control, such as reducing headcount um, internationally, as he said, but it sounds like they're going to be hiring a lot more in the US, where they see growth um, coming to fruition a bit better. So I wanted to call that out. You don't really see that in the stock with it reacting to the double beat up 22%. But there is a bit of a risk there going forward. But good to sort of level set expectations, I guess, is the takeaway there. And then with respect to the revenue beat, you'll recall it was a sizable beat, much bigger than I was expecting. I was expecting about 514 million. They came in like 10 million above that. And it seems as though that was recognizing some sort of SPAC revenue or other one time. And one of the analysts asked about that. So I'm actually not a big fan of that. It makes the beat look bigger than it otherwise would have been. Um, and so I think we're also benefiting from that with the stock price today. And so all of that to say, the conference call really didn't live up to my expectations. Um, but all of that said, essentially what I've been saying the last couple of days is Wall Street's been underestimating Palantir, so they were able to deliver these results and see the stock price benefit even from that. So I guess moving forward, we know they're going to be profitable. They've said that. They did a great job sandbagging that for Q1. If you go back and listen to Alex Karp in the Q4 conference call, that had me convinced they'd be profitable this quarter, and they were. And essentially, you consider the optics. They took a one-time benefit to become gap profitable for the last time last quarter. That wouldn't have been a good look if they did that and then were unprofitable this quarter. So I'm glad that sort of thought process held up. But that said, now that they say they're going to be profitable for each quarter this year, that certainly does raise the bar, raise expectations potentially beyond where they would have been otherwise. And so I think we're going to see some upward revisions. We've seen some analyst notes so far, nothing too crazy at this point, maintaining sort of where they were, if not increasing their price targets. So that's definitely great to see. The analyst coverage, I think, is definitely going to become more positive because, the gap in the stock from yesterday to today was they weren't operationally profitable last quarter on a gap basis, and now they are. And so essentially closing that gap, I think it does make sense why the stock is trading where it is. That said, I think, in terms of executing against what they've set themselves up for, I think it's going to be, more challenging going forward. But you consider the rest of the week, there's CPI, So I think we could see the stock push, even higher. I wouldn't be surprised to see it test double digits again, and even move past that, given what I'm saying, even despite, some concerns about expectations going forward with slower international growth, and profitability finally arising. And the other thing about AIP, right? They're talking a lot about AIP, AIP. They think it's going to be wildly successful. It had some, good tests of the product. Alex Karp, obviously very much a forward thinker when it comes to these types of things. So I'm also a little hesitant on this. But that said, I think it very much is a good talking point about where they're going and what they're developing. So they can essentially dangle this carrot for investors and saying, hey, we've developed this new product, we've capitalized on this moment. And they said they couldn't have done it without their, previous investments for however many years into the, infrastructure that they've been developing. So they say they have the moat in that capacity, but they're still able to rapidly iterate to get the artificial intelligence platform up, and now they're going to be deploying it. It was a little unfortunate how they weren't able to speak to pricing, but I think it's a little early for that. So all of that to say, I think it's worth dialing back expectations on AIP, but Palantir is obviously very excited about it, and potentially it's something that they can certainly speak to going forward. So there's that as well. But largely, I guess with price action, last quarter, gap profit, stock went up from about $8 to $10, 30% move or so on that news. And then we saw it really crumble all the way back down. And there wasn't really any buying to support it. So I think the natural question is, what happens this time, right? Let's say it goes to 10, maybe 10.50 or whatever it may be. Is it going to fall back down to where it was? Is this just another pump or whatever you want to call it? I don't think so. So last quarter it was an operating loss. And so sure, it was surprising that they recognized a gap profit from a one-time investment benefit. But ultimately, it didn't necessarily mean that the business was progressing forwards. But this time, I do think it's different. And I hesitate to say that, right? Because, anything can happen. But I think, you listen to the call and sort of excluding the negatives that I've discussed, I do think there are a lot of positives there. I think management has learned over these last couple of years about how to manage expectations and how to deliver against those expectations, and how to really speak to what investors are concerned about. And so Alex Karp, as much as I didn't like his answer on international growth, at least he didn't overpromise on that. And so he was able to be truthful as far as I can tell and honest about what they're facing and they're up against. And so I think largely they've done a great job with these earnings calls. And so I think analysts, if you listen to them, I think they're a lot smarter than we might think they are in the retail community. At least that's something I've found doing my own work and trying to publish some research. So I think things are certainly moving in the right direction. I'm definitely very bullish on Palantir. I think it could continue to move up, but even more so, I think it's going to hold where it is now at the very least. I don't think this is going to be another reversal downwards, but I've been wrong in the past. I was right on this prediction, but all of that to say, I think Palantir, since it went public September 2020, has made monumental progress. Is now a profitable company, $3 billion in the bank, in cash reserves, $2 billion in revenue, and things are looking up. So you always have to be mindful of valuation, and that's something I've certainly learned the hard way here. But I think Palantir has certainly come a long way. It'll be interesting to see sort of where the stock trades, how investors digest this news. because once again, it really does trade a lot around earnings, and then other announcements aren't really incorporated too much into the stock price. So once again, macro is going to play a significant role on a high growth name like this one, even though the growth um, is sort of deteriorating a bit. We'll see if it's able to break away from ARK-K and those more unprofitable growth names. And that's something I've been looking for. And as I mentioned last quarter, um, they spiked but came back down and weren't able to really break away from that group. And I think Palantir definitely isn't and really shouldn't be associated anymore with those unprofitable names. So I think it could be interesting if it's able to differentiate itself in terms of the stock movement now that it is, and could be attracting investors that wouldn't be interested in those unprofitable names, and certainly better than feared. And so, yeah, it was great to listen to the call. Um, I think they've done a great job, and hopefully this year sets up to be definitely rewarding for us Palantir investors. Um, and yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you all for joining, and talk again soon.